My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Gather around, the president is about to tell us the word of the day. What will he say? What's the word? What's the word? What's the word? What's the word? What's the word?
They don't know what the they're doing.
The word of the day is...
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that is committed to spending 2.7% of its time on silly puns by 2028. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi, pushing for a 5% commitment to silliness by 2035.
We work on one simple principle, that democracy is something you do, not something done to you. And so each week we aim to leave you empowered with information rather than paralyzed with rage.
So take a break, take a moment, take a breath, and settle in for another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
This week, the government unveils both its industrial and trade policies, while a significant rebellion from its own backbenches piles pressure on Starmer to change tack on welfare reform. What should the government be doing and how should it be paying for it?
And as the situation in Iran seems to enter a hiatus and NATO leaders meet in Brussels, we have a fresh update of the situation from Arthur Snell.
Plus, nominations are about to close and it looks like it will be a binary contest between the co-leadership ticket of MPs Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chowns versus London Assembly member Zach Polanski. What is next for the Green Party?
And joining us today is one half of that joint ticket. Welcome, Green MP Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Naomi. Hi, Alex. Lovely to be here.
Ellie, you have been an MP for a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And in a constituency that until last July was an ultra-safe Tory seat. And I mean ultra-safe.
Yeah.
Like Bill Wiggin won there last time by nearly 50 percentage points, which is ridiculous. So how much of an education has it been doing surgeries in that area, coming into contact with that mix of constituents?
Honestly, Alex, I mean, I very much feel that I knew my constituency before I started holding surgeries because I'd been campaigning.
Yeah.
You know, I had been out and about. The reason that we were able to win, you know, it's the fifth biggest ever swing in a general election constituency. The reason we were able to overturn such a huge Tory majority and win it for the Greens so conclusively was because we'd had this incredibly vibrant, inclusive, active, listening campaign, totally engaged with the constituency. And so we had been out and we'd knocked on literally tens of thousands of doors. You know, I really feel that I was properly connected with my constituents.
If you've got a notionally safe seat, as we used to call them, I don't know how many people even have one of those anymore, Tories would all be told, oh, well, Bill will be fine, go and campaign in the more marginal one down the road. Do you think the emergence of somebody actually campaigning for their vote made them realise what they've been missing out on?
Definitely, absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot of people did say to me that they felt their votes had been taken for granted for a long time. A lot of people had kind of reached a point of, you know, maybe they'd come from family background, they'd always voted Conservative, but they really, you know, they were crying out for something fresh to vote for and absolutely delighted that they felt that they had an option. They could vote for something that they believed in, somebody that they believed would do a better job. Honestly, I lost count of the number of people who said things like, I've lived here for 37 years and you're the first politician that's knocked on my door. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a grassroots campaign. And that's been my whole experience. I've been in politics about 10 years and that's been my whole experience. That the way that you counter the sort of loud hailer stuff that's totally switches people off and polarizes society, you counter that by going out and literally just having conversations with people. And then you're always pleasantly surprised by how much you have in common. You know, it was the anniversary of Jo Cox's death last week, and I went to an event commemorating her. Really wise words, actually. There's more that unites us than divides us. Actually, you know, what we were able to do was to connect with actually pretty universal human values. You know,
And a year on, does it feel, obviously politics is a very fluid business, but does it feel solid? Or does it feel like it's reverting to what it used to be politically?
my
Does it feel
constituency.
like,
Oh God, it feels completely solid. I mean, I don't, you know, I never
like,
take
all
anything
of
kind
those
of,
caveats, all
never
of those
any
caveats,
sort of
yeah.
complacency or anything like that. But people are so lovely. You know, people do literally stop me in the street or the supermarket car park or whatever all the time and say, thank you so much for what you're doing. And people write in and say, oh my goodness, your constituency caseworkers are amazing. You know, they've helped me with this, that and the other. Somebody said to me the other day, a gentleman that I've known for a long time who I know was a strong supporter of the previous Conservative MP, and I saw him at a community event. He was basically saying, you're doing an amazing job of kind of getting Herefordshire heard. So I think people appreciate having, I think I'm a pretty, well, I know I'm a pretty active MP. You know, I speak a lot in Parliament. I said I would work my socks off, and I really, really am. And people appreciate that. And they also appreciate politicians that are themselves, and you say what you believe about things. And sometimes people won't agree with everything that you say. And people aren't tribal and polarised and stuck in, you know, a really narrow way of thinking. I don't think, as sometimes politics tends to encourage us to think. Going back to what I was saying about, I found being involved in politics a really positive, constructive thing to do. I'm totally passionate about encouraging more people to get involved, to stand for election, to support other people standing for election, to diversify the voices that we've got, because politics is how we have conversations about the big and the difficult issues. And that's why I got involved, because I thought it's just too important to leave to the people who are currently stuffing it up.
To govern is to choose is the sophism variously adopted by politicians from JFK to Nigel Lawson. The original, however, belongs to Charles de Gaulle, and its full form is to govern is always to choose between disadvantages. The Labour government is finding this out, and how. Global instability continues to push up prices and suppress growth. On one side, it faces demands for significant spending increases in public services and defence. On the other, it is saddled with a historically high debt ratio and tax take, not to mention a hostile press and fidgety markets that distrust its economic credentials. Having softened its stance on winter fuel payments already and flying a few kites with reference to the two-child limit, the next battle arena seems to be its welfare reform bill. More than 120 Labour MPs have signed what amounts to a wrecking amendment. The government is committed to pushing ahead. It keeps saying so. Let's listen to Angela Rayner substituting at PMQs.
I'll tell the Right Honourable Member why we're pressing ahead with our reforms, and that is because we're investing £1 billion into tailored employment support, a right to try to help more people back into work, and ending reassessments for the most severely disabled who will never be able to work. Mr Speaker, we won't walk away and stand by and abandon millions of people trapped in the failing system, left behind by him and his colleagues.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady completely sidestepped my question. She can't even defend her own government's policy. Can she at least assure the House that the vote on Tuesday will actually go ahead?
Deputy Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, I don't know if he sort of listened to what I said because I was reading off the script, but what I can tell him, and I don't need the script, we will go ahead on Tuesday.
So something's got to give. What should give and what will give? First question, because I thought, hang on, everyone is talking about an amendment to the welfare reform bill. I thought that was still at green paper stage. What's going on? So the government has sort of jumped the gun with the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill, when its actual green paper and welfare reform and pathways to work is still in consultation. Why have they done that?
I don't know why you're looking at me. It's not my job to apologise to the government on the policy I completely disagree with. I mean, we've got a really centralised political system, right? Government can do whatever the heck they like, pretty much, unless they get such a huge bunch of rebels that they're forced to think again. And that is what the Labour rebels are hoping with this reasoned amendment. And good on them. You know, some of them have grown a bit of backbone, and I'm really, really glad to see it. But on the kind of process, exactly, this is one of the things that the rebels are really peeved about, because you've got this legislation coming forward while there's all sorts of consultations and thinking and impact assessments and all the rest of it. There's all still in the pipeline. And so it feels, you know, as well as being wrong, fundamentally wrong, which is what we in the Green Party would say, it's also very rushed.
At best, it is performative consultation. And at worst, it's we don't care what it says, we're going to do it anyway. So maybe you're right.
I mean, they're doing events right now.
I know.
There's like an event on the 26th or something in the Northeast to present their green paper and invite people for comment. And those events are still going for another few weeks. And they're kind of passing the legislation that's already saying this is what we're going to do.
And let's be clear, this will be consultation of disabled people, the recipients of
people that are affected by the
current
legislation.
It's not just the charity bosses and, you know, the people not in receipt of these things, but who represent them. These will be actual consultations with wheelchair users, with people with chronic disease and illness that will be being consulted on this. So the signal it is sending them and their carers and their family members to vote on it before the consultation has closed is really very worrying.
Some Labour backbenchers, or so I hear, seem to be looking for an off-ramp, floating the idea of a delay, further consultation, more information on specific things. How big do we think the rebellion will be?
I don't know. It's growing, though. So last night, an extra 20 names were added to the list that was published on the amendment 12 hours before. So it doesn't look like it's diminishing. We won't know until the vote happens how many of them can hold their nerve and do it, how many are just quietly biding their time and not revealing themselves to the whips. But I tell you this, the most depressing conversation I've had this week was with an MP who said to me, Naomi, the biggest problem our side has got, our side being the non-populist side, not their political party, is that I speak to so many Labour and Conservative backbenchers who have already given up. They think they've already lost their seat at the next general election. They're doing stuff in Parliament, but they can't see any light at the end of the tunnel for them to bother doing much
campaigning. But wouldn't that give you freedom to act with your conscience?
Exactly. So I'm saying it's a very depressing conversation that I had with regards to the outcome of the next general election. But what it tells me is that perhaps there are some that are like, well, who cares if I don't get made a junior minister in this Parliament? I'm not even going to be an MP in the next one, so I may as well vote with my conscience because I have to live with that forever, even if I don't have the job forever.
Let's try and look at it a little bit from the government's point of view. If the government gives way, having given way on winter fuel and making noise about the 2-child limit, will it then not be just open season? Will the government have any authority?
I mean, this is the argument about, never ever giving way, never ever admitting that you're wrong about anything, because then, but we've seen how that's ended up. They refused to U-turn on winter fuel and they lost huge amounts of political capital, huge amounts of support, huge amounts of credibility, huge amounts of kind of support within the PLP. And then eventually they had to U-turn. They should recognise now that it is the wrong thing to be pushing through next week. It's also ridiculous. There's no kind of hard deadline of some externally forced thing that means this legislation must go through next week, when they've got so many people, so many disabled people, so many MPs on their own side and opposition MPs like the Green MPs saying this is completely the wrong way round. They should absolutely step back and think again, because that would be the mark of a mature and wise and listening government.
I mean, it's interesting. I think about it sometimes in conventional political terms. And for instance, the fact that the chair of the Treasury Select Committee, a Labour MP, Meg Hillier, has signed the amendment. The chair of the Work and Pensions Committee, Debbie Abrams, has signed. I mean, these are devastating blows to the government in political terms. And then I kind of switch out of that media narrative and I think, isn't this actually just how democracy is meant to work? The legislature standing up to the executive and saying, we don't like this. We're not going to pass it.
And it happens so rarely.
That it becomes a big
because
event,
of the
right?
whipping system. You know, it's practically unheard of. And it is because it's not kind of the usual suspects doing the rebelling. It's all of these incredibly senior, very, very thoughtful people.
Experience.
From all wings of the Labour Party as well. And if the government kind of ploughs on in the face of that, you know, this is not some sort of factional campaign. This is a really broad group of people within the PLP who are genuinely really concerned and listening to their constituents. So the executive has to listen to them.
Does that not mean, at a really basic level, that Liz Kendall has just got it catastrophically wrong? Because she didn't have sufficiently sensitive antennae to know what would happen to this bit of legislation.
Oh, she did. Remember in 2015, you've got Harriet Harman as interim Labour leader, and the Tories put a bill through on welfare cuts. Harman whips Labour MPs to abstain on the vote. Every leadership candidate, bar Liz Kendall, defies the whip and votes against welfare cuts. Liz Kendall toes the line, and what does she get in that leadership race? 4%. Her party roundly rejected her as a candidate, and within a decade, she is running the department and pushing through welfare cuts. So this is not naivety. I can't believe it's naivety on her part.
She thinks
at
it's
all.
the right thing.
She thinks she's doing the right
that
thing.
much is clear. That much is clear. But even if you think it's the right thing, as a politician, there are ways of making it happen and ways of not making it happen. So I'm purely talking about her political skill here. She's cocked up. Ellie, you're an advocate of a wealth tax.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fair to suggest you think, at least in part, this narrative of difficult decisions is an ideological one rather than a real one. So what form would a wealth tax take, and what would the right priorities be for spending the money?
The Green Party has long advocated a much fairer tax system and for a wealth tax. And in our manifesto last year, we proposed, and we still stand by, a 1% tax on assets over £10 million and a 2% tax on assets over £1 billion. And that would raise many billions per year. It's not just us that are talking about this as well. It's also people like Tax Justice UK, Patriotic Millionaires, which I think is absolutely brilliantly named kind of campaign organisations, and millionaires saying, please tax us more. I met a bunch of them last week saying precisely this. And, you know, this is an idea whose time has absolutely come. It's really widely supported in the public as well, because you've got this situation where, like you say, government is saying, oh, you know, sorry, we've got to slash the aid budget. We've got to take away benefits that keep people out of poverty, out of fuel poverty, out of child poverty, out of poverty related to disability. We've got to take that money away, says the government, because it can't come from anywhere else. And that's absolutely bonkers, because here's the, you know, we've got this hugely unequal society, and we've got this huge inequality in the way that tax works, because at the moment, if you earn your income by going out, doing a job, earning a wage, you pay income tax, right? It is broadly progressive. If you get a whole chunk of income from just sitting on assets, whether that's property or shares or whatever, you're taxed at a much lower rate. And that can't be right. So in addition to a wealth tax on that, this is the super wealthy, by the way, anybody with more than £10 million of assets. And it's only the bits over the 10 million that would be taxed.
The 11 million.
Exactly.
The 1 million
it's only the 1 million
yeah.
over that would be subject to the tax. So it's kind of, you know, a minute amount of money in relation to the kind of great big pile. £10 million of assets, you'd still have no tax on that at all. So we want to see that, and we want to see things like capital gains tax being equalised with the rates that we have on income tax.
Do you recognise the practical obstacles to that. Labour tried to introduce a tax that brought close the inheritance tax situation between farms and other assets. You know, a VAT on private schools, taking that break away from them. And the entire press corps seemed to weaponize itself against the government. How do you counteract that? Massive propaganda campaign by people who have a lot of money.
So there's a hilarious example of that kind of propagandizing. And in fact, I was on the telly yesterday with somebody who was yet again trotting out this line about, oh my goodness, there's thousands of millionaires leaving the country.
Fleeing.
Right. There was one report that was done last year by this company called Henley and Partners, which is a company that specialises in offering golden passports, golden visas or whatever. They did a report saying that there were all of these millionaires leaving the country. Do you know how many media articles there have been based on that one single report? 10,900 articles on this one report at the last count. Overclaiming on the basis of what the report says, not saying that this is by a company that's got an interest in the people who did this. And so very usefully, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Tax Justice UK did an analysis of this, and they showed that this number of millionaires that's claiming to have left is kind of 0.03% of all of the millionaires in the country or something. I mean, it's absolutely minute. Yeah. So this kind of scare story about, oh my goodness, all of the rich people will leave the country and then where will we be? I mean, first of all, people stay in a country because of all sorts of reasons, because they've got family, they're connected, they've got property that they actually quite like living in, etc., etc. It's exactly. And there's increasing amounts of evidence that wealth tax is an idea whose time has come. And your point about what if the media kind of whip up a frenzy about it? Well, that's
it's not a what if. We know this will happen.
We know this.
The question is, how do you counteract it? How do you get the right information out there? You're saying that the real number is minute. There was also another report, which I found very, very interesting, because it's something that I had been wondering. This kind of population is highly mobile anyway. So the whole time I was hearing 10% have left in a year, I thought, well, how many leave in a normal year? Because these are people who, you know, if their focus is finding the best tax environment, they're always on the lookout. And it turns out that the number is about 8%. So we're talking about only 2% above what the number of people that would normally leave.
Various Nordic countries have introduced wealth taxes, and what they found was that the net gain in income for the Treasury, it far outweighed any loss to the exchequer from a few people leaving. There's kind of two parts of the argument here. There's the principle, and then there's the kind of pragmatism and the practice, right? And so the first point is you've got to be clear about the principle. Do we want to live in a world in which the very richest get taxed at a lower rate than normal people? No, that's clearly wrong. That's clearly unfair. Do we want to live in a country in which inequality is growing? No, clearly not, because we've got we've got outrageous numbers of people who are homeless. We've got public services that are on their knees. Obviously, tax is the way that we all club together to put into a pot to try and make things better. You've got questions about how effectively that's spent, but the point of taxation is that it should be fair. Then you've got a question about what's practical and pragmatic, what's doable. The point about the tax that at the level that we're proposing, the 1% over the 10 million assets level, it would be about 26,900 people, I think, that would come into that bracket. It's a tiny number of people, and HMRC have absolutely got the capacity to follow them up. Sometimes people say, oh, it was tried in France and they abandoned it. Well, in France, it was tried at a far lower level. It caught up. It was targeted at literally millions of people. So the administrative hassle and the fact that basically lots of the middle classes were caught up in it made the backlash much, much greater. I think
but the French do much more asset taxation than we do. Like there are taxes
everywhere does
on
more
swimming
asset
pools.
taxation.
Like they literally fly drones over land to see if you've got a swimming pool that you haven't declared, and then you get taxed on it.
Quiet riot.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Reform UK, on the other hand, are proposing schemes that let the richest actually avoid more tax.
This is extraordinary.
And calling them Robin Hood policies.
Honestly.
Let's have a little listen to Zia Yusuf.
Not all of the non-doms, of course, have left the country, have they? There are a lot here who, as you say, are paying an awful lot of tax, billions of pounds. So what will happen to those who have stayed here?
And so what we're saying is we're going to invite those people back here. We're going to charge them up front £250,000 to get started, and we're going to send that money directly to the 2.5 million people who are grafting hardest for the least.
But just to explain, so the non-doms who haven't left, they won't be able to do this?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. So it's not going to be available to British residents. If you are a non-dom if you're a non-dom who's already here, you've got to remember these people are already fleeing. So we will have strict criteria about who's eligible and who isn't.
Lots of them haven't fled.
Well, a lot of them are.
Is the intended audience here voters? Or is it actually the millionaires
that bankroll Reform UK? Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a serious question. What is the audience for this? Is it voters? Or is it people who think, if they're going to save me a few million, I might as well donate a bit of that up front?
Well, yeah, I mean, this might sound superficially attractive to a few people who already think that Nigel Farage is the best thing since sliced bread and aren't thinking about the implications. But all you have to do is look at one fact: £34 billion of tax break this will give to the richest people. I mean, it's utterly extraordinary. Where will that money have to come from? Joe Bloggs.
It's a one-off payment.
Every 10 years, I think he's proposing, wasn't it? It's clickbait. And here we are talking about this ridiculous... I mean, this is one of the frustrating things, isn't it?
The latest public attitude survey, it was out actually today, Wednesday as we record. Yeah. It reports that for the first time, the proportion of people who think disability benefits should be more generous is below half, at 45%. Hilariously misreported by The Telegraph, by the way, saying that the majority of people now think disability benefits are too high, when it's only like 11%. Less than a majority think they're too low, which is not the same thing. Yeah. But still, the figure was 67% as recently as 2017. So that's a 22% drop in the space of like 8 years. Does this show that Labour leadership is actually better tuned to public sentiment than MPs like you or backbench MPs in their own ranks?
I think two things have happened since, 8 years ago. One thing has happened is COVID.
Yeah.
So the disability benefits bill has gone up. There are more people who are ill. And also, in fact, how many million is it? Nearly 8 million still. It's going down slightly, but people on waiting lists. So people who are on NHS waiting lists, quite often maybe unable to work or even able to work, but still needing PIP and disability-related benefits to support them. And then the other thing that's happened is that there's been a whipping up, a scapegoating, essentially. Every time Labour says, there's not enough money in the country, we're going to have to cut disability benefits, we're going to have to cut winter fuel, we're going to have to cut foreign aid, we're going to have to keep 2 child benefit caps. The either implicit or sometimes explicit message is the thing that's the drag on this country's economy is the people who are at the bottom of the pile. And that is simply wrong. That's such a morally and practically wrong diagnosis, but it filters through into public perception, because the more that those who are on a big political platform are giving off that message, the more the general public hear it, can't help hearing it. And that's why it's so important for politicians to kind of say things like, hang on a sec, what's really going on in our country? Is it that there are people who are poorly and got disabilities and need support? Or is it that we've got an increasingly unequal country and Rishi Sunak can pay less effective tax than a nurse, that classic example. These are the real problems at the heart of our society. And yet we've got a government and a Labour Party that's engaging in distraction techniques.
I think a third thing has happened, and that is the cost of living crisis. And I
Mhm.
think people who a few years ago were feeling more comfortable, able to pay their weekly shop no matter how much it cost,
Mhm.
maybe have a holiday every year, didn't have to scrabble to make ends meet to pay the rent each month. If you ask them about benefits, they'll be like, well, I'm okay, so fine, yeah, be more generous to everybody else. But as that bites, as you have to work more hours to be able to purchase the same
Mhm.
thing, you begin to think, okay, why am I now? I used to have to work 40 hours a week to be able to pay the rent, the electricity bills, put fuel in the car and whatever else I needed to do. Now I'm having to take on extra work. I'm having to work 50 hours a week in order to be able to cover pretty basic costs. And it would, I think, begin to make you think, what are all these people who aren't going to work at all do? I think that resentment begins to build, whether it is towards immigrants, whether it is towards people on welfare, othering of any sort. That happens when people begin to feel more precarious in their own financial situation. And I think that is the third element of your good list.
And the pressure in the health service, I think, has had another effect, which I've seen firsthand with my partner, which is that there was a tipping point when it became so overwhelmed, the health service, especially at primary care level, became so overwhelmed, it was easier for doctors to sign people off work because there was no chance of them getting the help they needed either with a counsellor or with a specialist.
Social care is so intrinsically linked with everything that we're talking about. If you need care in order to get to work, that means that the care has to arrive before 8 a.m. if you have to be at work by 9 a.m. or maybe even earlier. And the care system is stretched to its knees. That means they don't turn up till 10, 11 in the morning. You are either still at home because you have to be without that care to help you dress and wash and get into transport, then maybe you've lost your job. And similarly, if you think, well, I'm just going to have to try and get to work so I don't lose my job, you can end up losing your care. And the local authority will say to you, you were not here today when your care arrived. We have now assumed you no longer need it. You'll have to reapply and go back to the beginning again should you want to. And now we're restricting visas for the social care sector. So to do all of these things at the same time, I think, is what is going to make it so impossibly difficult for the government to claim it as any kind of victory in a few years' time. Palpably, ethically, it is incredibly questionable for all of the reasons Ellie has outlined. But I think politically toxic and economically, I don't see that it adds up. We only have one call to action this week as we remember the life and work of Annabelle Rook. Last week, she was murdered. Clifton George has since been arrested after her body was found with fatal stab wounds following an explosion in her home. I met Annabelle a couple of months ago. Annabelle was an amazing mum to two wonderful children, a shining light who dedicated her life to supporting other people. Co-founding Mama Sue's to bring joy, creativity and vital casework supporting marginalised women and children, she lived every day with passion and purpose, believing we must be the change we want to see in the world. So I would like all of our wonderful listeners to remember the warmth, connection and dedication she radiated and try not to fall into despair, but continue her vital work at Mama Sue's and live our lives as she did, with joy, integrity and grace. So please do donate to Mama Sue's if you can and continue the work she started. We'll leave a link in the show notes.
Quiet Riot. Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Quiet Riot.
Now, after another busy few days of developments in the Middle East and a NATO summit, as promised, Alex caught up with our resident security expert, former diplomat Arthur Snell, late last night, Wednesday, for an update of what to believe, what to take with a generous helping of salt, and what it all means.
Hello, Arthur. Thank you for joining us again.
It's always a pleasure, in spite of everything that's always going on.
Yes, in spite of everything. Since we last spoke to you, which was for Sunday, there's been quite big developments.
One or two.
I mean, the US joined the thing, then the US ended the thing. So that has to be the shortest war anyone has ever been involved in.
Pretty much.
And then there was a NATO summit today, Wednesday. So shall we take those in turn?
Let's do it.
There's a little bit of confusion as to whether the strike by the United States did achieve its aim in as comprehensive a way as maybe Trump is suggesting. And there's some conflicting intelligence on that. So what's your view?
I think it's perfectly plausible that it didn't, simply because, there's a reason you bury things under a mountain. And I remember even before these so-called bunker busters were used, there were reports analysing the normal range of these bombs, and even with their extraordinary power and sort of explosive potential, it was at the limit of what they could hit. So it's perfectly possible that they haven't completely destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. And then as part of that, the 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, which is the thing that you need to make your nuclear bomb, that is a fairly small volume of very heavy and dangerous metal. It would be bizarre if they hadn't moved that anyway, because after all, everyone knew that if the Americans did join in, they'd be attacking this Fordo subterranean plant.
I guess part of the issue is that these bombs haven't really been used in a war situation before. So we're going by the sales pitch of the people who make them, I guess.
And ultimately, if your war lasts a few hours, as long as it takes to fly your B-2 bombers, drop the bombs and fly back, you aren't going to find out very easily if you've done the job. Trump's difficulty is that he wanted to announce victory almost before it had happened.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really correspond to the, messy realities of warfare.
As a complete outsider and a complete novice, what it looks like to me is that he sort of went in, did, I guess, the minimum necessary, declared victory, and then declared a ceasefire. Is that an unkind reading of events?
No, that might even be a kind reading, because I think it's even possible that he just declared a ceasefire when he felt that he had done what he wanted to do, which was destroy their nuclear program. I mean, of course, we don't really know what Trump's eventual goal was, and I would wager that he doesn't know, because at one point he was talking about make Iran great again, and for him that meant a regime change.
Yeah.
And the Israelis were talking about regime change as well. But I think Trump rather quickly realized that regime change would be a real red line for his anti-war MAGA alliance. And of course, he's the no to foreign wars. That's a major part of his platform.
Yeah, and there was quite a bit of backlash as well.
Oh, yeah. Normally, the MAGA movement is uber loyal to Trump, and they do exactly what he says. So if they're willing to speak out, that suggests that they're really unhappy about it. So I suspect that what happened was he felt, I need to announce victory and the end of the war as quickly as possible. And he's got form here with the India-Pakistan contretemps that unfolded earlier in the year. He just announced a ceasefire that he had negotiated, apparently to the complete surprise and bemusement of both the Indians and the Pakistanis. But actually, dare I say it, to be fair to Trump, that did cause the fighting to stop.
Of course, because he announced it and then insisted that they observed it.
Right.
Exactly the same as happened here. And, neither of them can afford not to.
And what's interesting is that you saw Trump criticize Israel more than any American president probably in recent years, including the F-bomb and the rest of it. And again, that's, that doesn't mean that suddenly we're fans of Trump, but it just shows that the extraordinary way in which he does everything, which is all about how he's feeling and whether or not he feels that his own prestige has been undermined. And because that was at stake, that pushed him to that ceasefire. So I suspect the Israelis are feeling a bit bounced, because I think they were very committed to bringing down the Islamic Republic, and they may still be aiming to do that, but just in a slower and less obvious way.
And I guess we're both old enough to remember how many times and in how many countries we've said, job done.
Yes.
Only to then be dealing with the complicated consequences sort of 10 years later. And, you could draw a line from North Africa all the way to Bangladesh that will go through every single one of those countries, where at some point we went, well, that's it. That was a huge success. Libya being quite a notable example.
Yeah.
And so I guess it is the low-level solution for Trump, because all he's interested in is that headline rather than the long-term repercussions.
Absolutely.
at the same time, you can't not credit that analysis that these are two countries that have been fighting for so long they don't know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, it is pretty accurate.
Yeah, it has a certain sort of simple truth to it that actually, what is it they're both trying to achieve?
Exactly.
Iran is definitely not going to be able to cause the state of Israel to cease to exist. Israel claims it has an existential threat from Iran, and I'm not saying it isn't threatened, but the idea that a threat to its existence is there, I think it is very questionable, given that Israel is a nuclear armed state. So you have this, both countries have a sort of natural behavior, which is to fight one another without really knowing why they're doing it.
And especially after Iran's proxies closer and around Israel have been degraded quite significantly, it is difficult to go with the narrative that they are an existential threat. Then the last thing that happened is Trump rolls into the NATO meeting, and those summits, which usually will have 10 or 12 items to look at, suddenly this was a one-item agenda, and it was keep the big baby engaged for long enough to declare this a success and leave here happy, right?
Yeah.
So this 5% commitment by 2035, I think it is, how realistic is it? Is it something that they're just offering to Trump as a victory and a trinket to go away? Or do you think countries will seriously now engage in getting up to that really quite high number?
It definitely is a thing to keep the big baby happy, and that he can stomp around and say, Europe never paid its bill and now they're going to do it, and that's thanks to me. And of course, from the outset, Trump hasn't ever really understood what NATO is. It's an alliance, not a sort of single organization with a single budget.
Yeah.
So he's always had this idea that the countries aren't paying in as if there's a sort of joint account, whereas obviously it's about countries investing in their defense and then using that mutual defense to support one another. Having said all of that, as we've, I know, discussed in the past, Alex, there is some truth to underspending, not by every country in Europe, but many countries in Europe. And of course, the Americans, long before Trump, made similar complaints. So these are all factors in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's definitely creative accounting built into this 5% number. And of course, the other point is that it's a long-term target. Trump isn't a details man. So he gets his victory.
Yeah.
He can go back to America and say that they're no longer freeloaders. No one would expect it to have happened in the short period of his final term in office. And in that sense, you know, what one could say, well, they're just placating him. But it is a significant change. And yes, there's creative accounting. But actually, even America uses creative accounting. There are things that are done by the DoD, which in other countries might be done by other ministries. You know, so it's very easy to sort of be cynical and say, oh, typical Europe. But actually, lots of countries will do that. Even accounting for the creative accounting, if that's not a contradiction, this is going to be a massive change in European defense and is transformational at a time when, of course, Russia is being particularly threatening to the Western alliance. So I think it's a significant moment, and I'm at risk now of crediting Trump both with getting a ceasefire and with transforming NATO's budget. I'm not normally the Trump praise singer, but I seem to be this evening.
Look, we can afford to be magnanimous in these things. The Iran situation, I would say less so, because it is effectively a conflict that could have been avoided.
Yes.
Had Trump not been a dickhead from the very start, had he not cancelled an agreement that he wanted to cancel basically just because it was Obama's agreement, for no other reason. It was about to agree almost exactly the same thing, but just sign his name to it. So I would give him less credit for ending a war that he effectively started than the NATO stuff. And the NATO stuff, I would say, is based on a new understanding in Europe that they can't rely on America. So again, it's not the outcome may be positive, but the causes are not as rosy as they appear, because basically we're entering an era of saying you can't really completely trust your allies.
Yeah.
And we need to arm more. And whether that makes the world a safer place or a less safe place, I'm not sure.
Well, I agree with you, because ultimately, yes, America walking away from European security is clearly not good for Europe. And I don't think it's good for America. And of course, America sort of locking itself into Atlantic security has been very good for America. It's been good for trade. It's been good for the European economy. You know, it's been win-win, basically. Yeah. The one thing that one might say, which is that when you had the brilliant, articulate, gracious Barack Obama saying similar things, people just nodded along. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely with all of that. All I'm saying, I guess, is that Europe is a rich enough continent and a rich enough collection of countries that it should be putting its big boy pants on and, standing on its own 2 feet in terms of its own security. But European countries are doing it because they think that an America that carries on in that direction will eventually walk away.
Yeah.
And so that makes NATO weirdly weaker. It doesn't feel like a massive victory for NATO. It just feels like we're moving into a post-NATO world almost.
Yeah, and I guess the big question, because obviously the idea is that Europe steps up and in so doing keeps the Americans on board for the fundamental NATO purpose, which is Article 5, the mutual defense.
Yeah.
But for me, the difficulty is that I don't believe that Trump would send his Marines into battle to defend Latvia.
Well, he was umming and ahhing about it even at the summit. So
exactly, and actually, I don't believe J.D. Vance would do it. Or frankly, any of the MAGA loons that seem to be, possible successors to Trump. There are aspects of NATO that will continue with the Americans. I suspect the Americans won't want to unwind their sort of nuclear commitment to NATO. But I think you're right that the basic idea about what NATO is in terms of an alliance of mutual self-defense, I think it is now very questionable that it includes America anymore.
Yeah. And the greatest danger for Trump is that he gets what he wished for, which is a Europe that is completely independent defense-wise.
Yeah.
Because generally speaking, it's America that keeps asking us to go into wars with it. So,
absolutely. And interestingly, of course, it's also America's military-industrial complex, which has benefited immensely. And that's a huge industry for his country. So, again, a rational actor wouldn't look at this and behave in this way. I think one area of the summit, which we haven't touched on, which is important, is Ukraine. And of course, ordinarily, Ukraine is sort of at the heart of the agenda for a NATO summit. And it felt like a slightly fringe issue at this summit. Again, that is a function of Trump's behavior. But I think, sadly, Ukraine was little discussed at the sort of top level in the summit. And that's just an unfortunate reflection of the Trump era.
Yeah, I mean, the silver lining, I guess, is that even with America largely checked out of the Ukraine situation, with Europe's help, Ukraine is still holding its own.
It is. And importantly, two things have happened. One is that Europe has, slower than it should have, has stepped up in terms of sending weapons and being better at manufacturing weapons. But also the Ukrainians themselves are now manufacturing a huge amount internally in the country. Of course, Ukraine, is a big industrial nation. Yeah. So in a way, that's not surprising. It needed a bit of time to get organized. So Ukraine, if it gets through this war, will end up obviously with the biggest and most experienced army in Europe. And so, again, we're in one of the trickiest phases of this story, particularly for Ukraine. But actually, it's already possible, perhaps, to see a Ukraine that is able to stand largely dependent on its European allies with a tiny bit of support from America, but certainly not the way it was right at the beginning.
Yeah. Arthur, always fascinating to chat to you, and I'm sure we'll be doing a lot more of it in the weeks and months to come. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
If you want a fuller update, I would strongly encourage you to look for Arthur's excellent podcast, Behind the Lines. We'll leave a link in the show notes.
Quiet Riot.
Now, it's the segment where we stir the matcha latte while scoffing our organic quinoa salad and take a cheeky peek at what has got the internet in a knot this week. It's time, of course, for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Go on then, Alex, what's upset them this time?
This is a really odd one this week, okay? So this is about the world's most inclusive museum, the Manchester Museum, which has just won the European Museum of the Year award. And the Telegraph went along to assess the museum. And here's where it gets interesting. Came back with an absolutely glowing review.
Wow.
So Dr. Matthew Grin, who went along to check it out, was like, I was just blown away by how good it is, how truthful to its mission to tell a story of belonging it is, how engaging it is, how nice a space it is. Absolutely glowing review.
Wonderful.
But here's the thing.
Oh dear. Does there have to be a downside?
Well, it's not necessarily a downside. So the article went up yesterday with the title, "The Anti-Woke Brigade Won't Like It, but this inclusive museum is actually rather good."
Okay.
3 hours later, the title had been changed of the piece to "This Woke Museum has just been named Europe's best," and rightly so.
Okay. Okay.
So this week's
Yeah.
Wokey Dokey is The Telegraph. The Telegraph is woke, or at least the morning shift of The Telegraph is
woke.
too woke for the afternoon shift of The Telegraph.
Well, that is not what I was expecting to hear. Thank you, Alex.
It's a very interesting tale,
Are we
isn't it?
dreaming? Am I asleep?
I really want to go to this museum after reading that review.
Yeah.
It sounds absolutely brilliant.
Let's do a trip.
Time for an outside broadcast, I think, for you two.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
The Green Party may not always dominate the headlines, but it's quietly preparing for what could be its most consequential year yet. As summer 2025 heats up, so does the contest to lead the party into next year's local and devolved votes in 2026, potentially all the way to the general election, whenever that might be, when the party will of course hope to build on its success of quadrupling its MP numbers at the 2024 general election. Leadership hopefuls are stepping forward. With co-leadership remaining firmly on the agenda, the race is on to define the Greens' identity at a time when climate, inequality and trust in politics are all converging in crisis. Now, we've previously interviewed Zach Polanski, who is running on a solo ticket, so we thought it was only fair that you got to hear from the competition. Ellie Chowns, MP for North Herefordshire, and Adrian Ramsey are running on a joint ticket, pitching a vision of the Greens not just as the conscience of British politics, but as a credible force for electoral disruption. One that can win power locally, gain parliamentary influence nationally, and hold Labour's feet to the fire where it counts. But the terrain is tricky. For all their principled consistency, the Greens still face challenges in breaking through the noise, especially in a media and electoral system stacked against them. With the climate crisis accelerating, Labour having a whopping majority, the Tories U-turning on net zero, and the Lib Dems looking to reclaim their progressive ground, how do the Greens cut through? And can a new leadership team provide the clarity and clout to do it? Ellie, are two leaders better than one?
Well, I think two for the price of one is the sort of offer that voters and shoppers across the country love, don't they? I mean, we've had the co-leader model for quite a while now, and it's worked really, really well for us. I mean, there's a kind of, there's a practical advantage. You can literally be in two places at once as a leadership team. You can do twice as many media interviews. You can visit twice as many constituencies and so forth. And it's also, it kind of communicates something about us as a party, I think. It communicates that cooperative, working together idea that is absolutely at the core of what we stand for as a party. And, Adrian and I, our campaign for the leadership, we've got this strapline, together we win. And it's because we know through winning constituency elections in kind of previously considered unwinnable seats with huge majorities. How did we do that? We did that by bringing huge numbers of people together. And that's the challenge that the Green Party faces. It's a challenge we know how to step up to. It's just a question of transformationally scaling up. We have learned over the years, and particularly actually under Adrian and Carla's leadership, the last 4 years, we've had our most successful period ever as a party. We know how to win elections. We know how to kind of really transform our electoral fortunes and upturn people's expectations. And so we want to roll that out even further. We want to roll that out across the country, and we want to support and empower our local activists, candidates, campaigners to do exactly what we've done so transformationally in our constituencies.
Is the choice to have sort of half of the previous leadership team remain and half of it refreshed, as it were, also a conscious one? Is it so that you have some continuity but also some new ideas, or is it?
It's a happy accident, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
Carla decided that she wanted to step down from the leadership and kind of focus on her work as a constituency MP. Absolutely, totally understandable, and she's done a brilliant job for 4 years. And I was encouraged to step forward into that space. I have to be honest, it's not something that I'd had on my radar or kind of.
But leadership should always be given to those kinds of people.
Well, I hope.
I mean, megalomaniacs, the ones that really want it, usually would never have it.
I literally didn't even know there was a leadership election happening this year.
Great. Whoever wins, it is this critical election year. We've got national elections in Wales. Obviously, we have them in Scotland as well, but listener note, we're talking about the Green Party of England and Wales leadership. We are not talking about Green Party Scotland leadership. So I know Scotland have got elections, but I'm talking about the big elections that the Green Party leadership would be overseeing, and of course a host of local elections across the country, including all-ups in London, where the Greens in July 2024 finished second in a large number of seats. So what are you and Adrian advocating as the campaign approach for 2026?
Do you know what? The campaign approach, wherever it is actually what we have done so successfully so far. It is appealing to the broadest possible range of voters, because that is how we win in first past the post elections, and how we do it locally. It's good old fashioned kind of, pounding the streets, knocking on doors, having those conversations. What I was talking about right at the start, that is how we win people over. And then once people vote Green, people sometimes hesitate a bit about voting Green because they're not sure we can win. Once they vote Green and we win, they're just absolutely delighted, and then they keep on voting Green. And that's how we've had 8 solid years running of doing better and better and better at local elections. Now, it's an interesting situation in Wales, of course, next year, because they're going to have they're shifting to a proportional voting system there. And we're really excited about the prospect of getting our first Senate member.
Does that change in the system make it a bit more difficult, though, for the Greens to get their first Senate?
No, I think it makes it easier for us to get. I mean, proportional systems are better for Greens in the sense that we will get represented at the level of our vote share. If we had a proportional system in Westminster, we'd have something like 70 MPs instead of 4. Once they've got a proportional system in Wales, then I confidently expect that the Green vote will just go up and up and up, because people will know that if they vote Green, their vote will count. It will elect a Green representative, and people desperately want that. We were talking about the British Social Attitude Survey earlier in the show, and of course that came out today, and it had a section on attitudes to proportional representation. Oh, wow. And there's been a transformation in it. It is huge. So now there is this strong public majority, 60%, I think, of the people want a proportional voting system. And not only that, but it's also across every political group.
Even Tories.
Even a majority
Perhaps
of Tories.
No surprise, given where they're polling at the moment.
But this is another idea whose time has absolutely come. And we're just, the political establishment has just got to catch up with it. I'm really glad we've got proportional systems in Scotland, now in Wales. We've London Assembly, also a proportional system. We want it across the country. But in the meantime, we have to win in first past the post situations. And that, I think that is where, Adrian and I have got really something to offer, learned from experience, because in order to do that, like in proportional elections, I think in the London Assembly election, Greens got something like 11, 12%, something like that. In our first past the post Westminster contests, I think I got 43%, something like that. You have to get, a plurality of votes. Yep. You have to get a whopping great big chunk of votes. And body, no party, no candidate can do that just by appealing to a narrow base.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to speak to a really wide range of voters and a really wide range of concerns and show how what you believe in, the principles and the policies that you stand for, can help meet their concerns. And I think that's what Adrian and I have shown so successfully with huge teams, building huge teams. We've been able to do, mobilising that sense of excitement that's resulted in those wins.
The obvious question to ask you there is that currently the co-leaders are, as you mentioned, Carla Denyer representing a previously Labour urban Bristol seat, and your co-conspirator Adrian, who, like you, representing a previously Conservative rural constituency. So do seem like the perfect duo to demonstrate that appeal of the Greens, to have a very wide slice of the electorate that will back them. So do you worry that co-leaders from, I mean, very different parts of the country, but very similar in their makeup of previously Conservative, much more rural, that it'll be more difficult for you and Adrian as a duo to win over that wide section of voter base?
No, the short answer is no. I mean, I get that, what you've said about kind of the Carla and Adrian urban, rural kind of perfect sort of match of all things to all people thing.
Like, shouldn't it be you and Sean?
I kind of get that point. But most parties have a single leader and nobody ever says to them, oh, you represent an urban constituency.
That's a fair point.
How can you possibly appeal to rural voters? Or, oh, you happen to be from a rural constituency. How can you possibly? Or you're from a northern constituency. How can you appeal to people in the south or whatever? You know, so from that perspective, I genuinely think it's an absolutely ridiculous argument. I went to university in Brighton. I lived in Brighton for years. And, you know, if you look at the kind of my politics, my background, my principles, you know, the activism that I've been engaged in and all the rest of it, if you have some sort of idea in mind of what you think a sort of a traditional MP for a rural area is, it's a caricature, basically.
Yeah.
I think that we win based on ability to mobilise people, ability to inspire people. That's been my whole... I didn't get involved in politics until I was 40, basically. And so I spent 25 years trying to change the world through activism, trying to change the world through my work. I worked in international development for many years. I worked for social and environmental justice my whole adult life. And basically I hit 40 and I thought, my goodness, politics matters so much because it literally changes the world. And rather than just writing the letters to my MP, I want to be kind of, you know, in there being more active. Actually, when I joined the party, I had no dreams of standing for election whatsoever. I just wanted to be part of the solution, pay my subs, deliver a few leaflets, be a small cog in a, you know, growing the green machine, if you like, growing the green voice. And I just got my teeth into it. I got more and more excited about it. And that's been my experience of being a candidate, being kind of the figurehead for a local campaign. So many people say it's just brilliant being part of this. They get energized. And so you build this snowballing sense of enthusiasm about changing politics. And I want to help communicate that excitement. Yeah. That is not a Herefordshire specific thing. You know, that is something that can catch light anywhere in the country, in any constituency.
Can I ask you something, Ellie? You look at what is happening at the moment with Reform UK and whatever you think of them politically, and we have much to say about them in those terms. But one thing it does demonstrate is that there is an appetite out there for something different, and that a breakthrough can happen quickly and in a big way. Does that make you rethink that target of going sort of from 5 to 20 in the next election? In the current fluid environment, does that seem a little bit of a conservative aim?
This is a question that's kind of been... I've never put a number on it. I mean, I would like to see dozens of Green MPs because that would represent our strength in the country as a whole. But I recognise that to do that, we have to build the candidates, we have to grow the candidates, we have to support the teams, we have to generate the resources needed to do all of that. If sometimes people have said, oh my goodness, but you know, Reform have broken through like that, and the Greens, we have had steady growth. We have had really good results in the general election, also in the recent local elections. What Reform has done has been to move into space that has been vacated by the failures of Labour and the Conservative. That's what's happened there. And I think that there are a couple of things that I'd kind of want to pick up on there. So in terms of appetite, I think that there is perhaps an appetite that's inherent to all of us about we would like complicated things to be made simple. And reform absolutely grossly oversimplifies complex issues down to very misleading and frequently very scapegoating, sloganeering type of politics. And that is not something that I would want to ape in any way, not in the content, not in the style, not whatsoever. Another thing about reform is, of course, they've got huge amounts of money from some quite questionable sources, including fossil fuel, promoters and all the rest of it. And also an entire TV station, as far as I can make out, where they spend a lot of time moonlighting. And so
which
there
one?
Is
No,
and so that's not a resource that the Green Party has access to. When people sometimes kind of say to me, "Oh, why can't the Green Party kind of break through in the way that reform has?"
Yeah.
And I can really understand that sort of sense of frustration, because actually it was basically Nigel Farage that drove me into politics in 2015. Literally, it was kind of, it was after Christmas. I just could not bear the way the country was going. And it was particularly because of the rise of Farage's politics. And I thought, I want to see my kind of values and politics catch light in the same sort of way. But I'm under no illusions that it is a long haul. Politics is a marathon, not a sprint. And we have seen several iterations of Farage's party, literally several iterations of it kind of go vroom up and then back down again. Absolutely, it has unfortunately shifted the political dial in some really damaging ways. Brexit, scapegoating of migrants and so forth. But I think that it would be like saying, the way to beat Trump is by being more like Trump somehow. I mean, I just completely reject that. And my experience of politics is the way that you challenge it is by engaging with people on a personal level. You challenge the kind of the loud hailer, the sloganeering style of politics by actually engaging with real people.
What is worrying, though, is the 2028, 29, whenever it will be general election, being framed very much as, if you're a progressive, you've got to row in behind Labour because otherwise you're getting Farage. And there is some polling that has done a squeeze of Lib Dem and Green voters, and when you give them that very polarised question, they have said, well, okay, well, in which case we would hold our nose and vote Labour. We've talked a lot about changing the electoral system. We all, I think, agree in this room that needs to happen. So this isn't a question about that, Ellie. It's more a question of how much do you feel within the Green Party that there is a duty to stop Farage by having serious grown-up conversations with the parties on the other side of British politics, given how fragmented the vote is on that side and how increasingly consolidated because of Tory collapse it's becoming on Farage's side under a first-past-the-post system?
I honestly think it is way, way, way too early to be speculating like that. It's 4 years until the next election. A lot has changed in the last year. Like I said earlier, look at any 4-year period in the last decades, and there have been really unexpected transformations. So I just really, really wouldn't be speculating like that. The other thing is that, just as a kind of general point, in first past the post elections, there's this kind of tension in any constituency between people kind of voting according to what they want to happen nationally in a general sense of where the national mood is going,
and who they like
versus who they like locally, or what the local demographics are like, and whether somebody is campaigning hard locally and effectively locally. And that's where, like I was saying earlier, we have learned, to do that really, really well. The Green Party is really, really good at campaigning in the places where we are targeting. We just need to grow our resources, grow our teams to be able to do that much, much, much more widely.
But you must have an
inevitably,
instinctive...
but just to kind of finish the... Sorry,
you must have an instinctive stance, though, towards the
Progressive alliance
informal
or- yeah.
arrangements in a seat
Oh.
that you can't win, but you can really hurt the other party by running a very full-on campaign. I mean, I genuinely don't know if there was any kind of formal or informal arrangement in the seat you won, but I
No.
did see that the percentages of
There was a
Labour
very
and Lib
powerful
Dems
tactical
went.
voting campaign that backed Ellie.
No, I know, but the percentages of Labour and Lib Dems did go down quite a bit. So you were, whether it was an active choice or not, you were helped by people consolidating their vote behind the person that they thought could beat the Conservative candidate in that constituency, right?
Absolutely. So in my constituency, no, there wasn't. So both Labour and Lib Dem campaigned actively in my constituency, despite the fact that I said, look, I've got a great chance of beating this guy. I'm going to be campaigning really hard. Maybe you'd like to put your energies into somewhere else, but they still didn't. But the voters got the message because we were the ones getting the message over to them. Now, on the kind of broader question of cooperative politics, I suppose, I fully believe in cooperative politics. You know, sometimes journalists try to ask questions about, oh, would you go into coalition with XYZ or whatever? You know, I believe in the sort of politics because I believe in proportional politics. I believe in having a voting system that will basically force all political parties to work together to find out where the common ground is, to force coalitions, because I think that is in the long-term best interests of the country. And of course, it will involve some degree of compromise. At local level, I've absolutely been, you know, the Green Party in my council, where we had 53 seats and we weren't able to contest all 53 of them. And so we thought about where we would focus and we cooperated with independents and kind of talking about where they would focus. Yeah, those sort of arrangements have happened in all sorts of places across the country, you know, since the year dot. However, at the last general election, the Greens stood in virtually every seat because we want to give people that opportunity to vote Green. And if there are ever any sort of kind of pact, then it has to be reciprocal. That's been tried some years in the past, and the problem was that it wasn't reciprocated. And I think that any party that thinks, well, these are our voters, you know, they voted Labour before, therefore they belong to Labour, that sort of taking for granted is one of the reasons why Labour is basically struggling now. So I do think that shifting to a proportional voting system is super, super important. I absolutely do acknowledge that the Green Party, although I confidently expect that we will be running a full slate of seats in 2029, but we're inevitably not going to be able to focus on all of those seats.
Well,
and
this
so
is what I was going to ask you. I was going to say to you, roughly how many target seats, if you want to call them that, do you think the Green Party should be aiming for at the next election?
I mean, I have to be honest with you, Naomi. I'm not in a position to give you a number for that. A, because I'm not yet elected as leader. B, because actually it isn't the leader's decision anyway. And C, because we're doing the prep work already. So we're already running a programme to encourage local parties to express interest, to encourage candidates to express interest. We're already kind of doing that process of mentoring and supporting people who
Capacity
might want to be. Exactly. And it's about supporting the candidates, which is so important. It's about building the teams, you know. In North Herefordshire...
And your membership is growing, so you will have a different slate of resources available to you, presumably, in terms of volunteers and money.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, if you look at, so in North Herefordshire, we had loads of activists that weren't actually members of the party. They were supporters of the party. They got involved. They're still helping deliver leaflets and so forth, which is amazing. It's a way of politics bringing people together around shared values.
And your council base has grown very significantly.
It has.
Over the last few years.
Yeah,
so you
basically
have got
doubled.
infrastructure in places that you never did before.
Yes, and in a very wide range of demographics. You know, there are some people who are still very stuck in the past of kind of, you know, we had one MP in Brighton and that's, you know, some people still think that's the only sort of place that we can win. But for many, many, many years, we've been winning in seats all over the country. I think it's 40 administrations that the Greens are now in power, often in shared administrations. And we do, you know, we do really well in shared administrations because we're a cooperative bunch of people, right? And also because we don't have, you know, some of the at local level, sometimes you have Labour people locally who want to cooperate, but they're told by head office that they flipping well can't. We don't have that. You know, we're unwhipped. We trust our activists, we empower our local parties and support them and encourage them. And that's how we've managed to grow so successfully so far.
Ellie, if people want to support your campaign, find out more about what you and Adrian are doing in the leadership race, where can they get more information?
Well, we've got a campaign website. It's ellie-adrian-2025.org. You can go to that website, sign up to our mailing list, and then we won't bombard you, but we'll send you lots of useful information. We're doing events, we're doing online events, open Q&As, that sort of thing. Also, I mean, just follow us on socials. You know, Ellie Chowns is quite an unusual name. Follow me on socials and you'll find links, you know, pretty much every day that'll connect you into our campaign, as well as into the work that me and Adrian are doing in Parliament all the time, because, you know, we're there right at the centre of politics in the biggest political platform in the country. We want to use that. We want to put that at the service of the party and make the most of it to help the Green Party grow stronger and stronger.
So we will leave all the links in the show notes to all of that and more, where you can follow Adrian and Ellie online, link to the website and more.
Quiet Riot. Time now for the part of the show where, against all odds, we're bringing a good news story. Yes, really. In a world full of doom-scrolling, disaster, despair, this is our small act of resistance, a glimmer of kindness, progress, or plain old human decency, to remind us that not everything is on fire, at least not all the time. So take a breath and clench your jaw and let a little hope in as we grin and share it.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us, Naomi?
Well, it's a story from your neck of the woods, actually.
Is it?
South Bermondsey.
Oh, right. I thought you were going to say Greece. My other neck of the woods.
So, as we all know, Alan Turing's work laid the foundation for artificial intelligence and modern computer science. And during World War II, he played this critical role in breaking the Nazis' Enigma code, giving Allies advantage, helping win the war in Europe probably about 2 years sooner than it would have otherwise. And the good news is that many of his original papers have just been saved from the shredder after they were discovered in a house clearance by a family member of the collection owner, who thankfully thought twice before sending them for destruction. They included a personally signed copy of his 1938 PhD, Systems of Logic based on ordinals, and his 1936 paper on computable numbers, also known as Turing's Proof, which introduced the world to the idea of universal computing and is widely described as the first programming manual of the computer age. So, these are incredibly critical, beautiful bits of work, and they're known as off-prints, and they had originally been given to Turing's mother, Ethel, and then to her son's friend and fellow mathematician, Norman Routledge. And Routledge had kept the collection, I think, in his attic, and following, him having to leave, I don't know if he had to go into a care home or passed away, I'm not entirely sure what happened, but his nieces and nephews rescued it all. They found it all and made that decision to actually have a look in it before binning it and go, oh my God, it's Alan Turing!
That's brilliant.
So not only were they rescued, they've now just fetched nearly $500,000 at auction this week in what's been described as one of the most important auctions in British history. So if that is not a lesson to check what's in the attic before you take it all to the refuse site, I do not know what is.
That's brilliant. That's a really good news story. Thank you, Naomi. As ever, we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin, but also share it.
And that's a wrap on this week's show. Our enormous thank you to Ellie for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's
Thank
just
you,
been
Ellie.
lovely.
It was really lovely having you.
And listeners, please remember to head over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and sign up to back us if you can, to visit our bookshop and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got loads of fabulous guests and topics lined up for the weeks ahead. And remember that Ko-fi backers have helped shape the agenda via our online editorial meetings. So if you want to be part of the future of the show, do consider signing up.
We'll be back on Sunday, but in the meantime, have a wonderful end to your week.
Safe in the warm embrace of our thanks and our love. Bye.
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 Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot. Grows stronger and stronger.
Well, we will live. Well, we will live. What is wrong with me today? I'm so hot. I think.